Thank you. So we've been talking about craft all week. That makes me very happy. I love to talk about craft. Well, I'm an American, so all we ever talk about is our work. Hi, how are you? What do you do? This is what I do. It's all we seem to ever say. But the idea of craft is a little bit different from the idea of work. Work and career and all those things tend to sound very very heavy, as opposed to craft, which when you talk about it, you talk about practicing your craft. And I love that idea of practicing, my practice. This is what I practice. And I love that because it connotates a sort of continuous evolution, continuous progression, getting better, what we do. Almost never ending, right? Never complete, like we heard about this morning. And I think that really fits well on the web and the kind of work that we all do, because the web is nowhere near complete, as for one example, but even more importantly, the things that we make now live. It's not like traditional design process in the past where you would finish and you would launch a thing, you would print a book or a magazine, finish painting. We don't finish now. And I don't believe there's actually a past tense to make for the web. There's only I am making. So I wanted to tell you a story today about making a product, the Typekit, that we've been working on for a few years, and how we had to use the design process continuously. The same techniques that we would use in the past to make something that would be finished, we have to continuously practice in the life and evolution of a product. And so that brings us to this. A picture of somebody in a canoe. I'd like you to picture yourself in this situation. Imagine that that's you in the canoe, and it's early morning, and you're on the lake in some place that you love to visit out in the wilderness, and it's quiet, and the sun has just risen, mist on the water, very peaceful time. Then there's a thud, and the canoe tips, and all of a sudden you're in the water, and you're underwater, and you come up, and you're kind of choking, and you have no idea what's happening. Your body is sort of going through this flight or fight response that we have, and you don't know what's happened. And you look around, and you see two teenagers pointing at you and laughing. They've tipped you over, and they think it's hilarious, and off they swim. How would you feel in that situation? Would you feel angry at the teenagers? Wishing to get revenge at the teenagers? Would you feel frightened of them? Are they going to come back? Are they going to do more to me? Am I in any kind of danger? Those are very natural feelings to have in a situation like that. And that makes us very human. But now if we sort of roll back and picture this again, you're in the boat, you're warm and dry, and you're paddling along, and there's the mist on the water, and it's very quiet, and you feel peaceful, and then there's a thud again, and the boat tips, and you're in the water, and you come up, choking on the water, and you look around, what happened? And you see a log, a piece of driftwood, just kind of wash up on the shore, and you'd run into it, and you were at the same place at the same time, and that didn't work, and your boat gave. You were in the water. Now, how would you feel towards the piece of wood? Same way? Would you be angry at the piece of wood? Would you want revenge from that piece of wood? Would you be frightened of the piece of wood lying there on the beach? Very likely not. That also is sort of very human, right? Some of us, many of us, may in fact blame ourselves. Like, oh, it's so stupid. Why didn't I see that, right? Well, we wouldn't blame the piece of wood. The response we have towards a piece of wood could be the response we might have towards the teenagers. That response of saying, well, that happened. What do I do now in this situation? It's a difficult response to have if something stressful and bad happens to us. But that technique is known as equanimity. Equanimity is a term, I'll give you the definition. It's a state of mental or emotional stability, especially in a difficult situation. Emotional stability. All right? Another way of thinking about that is seeing with understanding. And it is taking that emotional response we have to almost all of the events that happen to us, and before simply reacting, understanding what's happened and evaluating that, and then respond. It's a more sort of almost more mature response to stressful situations. And it's something that we can practice, we can get better at. And it's one of the things, one of the big epiphanies that I had in my life, is that we are not our emotions, that we have control over them, right? It's kind of part of growing up. And so I want to talk about this as not just one of the most important qualities that you can develop in your life and in your work and in your relationships, but also as teams when we work together. A team can have this sense of seeing with understanding, this grace under pressure, this equanimity. And I'll do that by telling you a story that happened to my team. This happened a while back on a December morning at about 6:24 a.m. I woke up much earlier than I normally wake up, to the sound of splashing water, which was troubling because I don't live very close to the water, and I shouldn't have heard the sound of splashing water. And so I followed that sound, and I went into the bathroom, and this is what I found in the bathroom. So the good news is I know who this is. And the bad news is that my son had now was working on his third roll of toilet paper, just really getting them down in there. So for those of you who are parents, you might know something about equanimity, right? Okay. So we sorted that problem out, and we went downstairs and started our morning routine, having breakfast, and me then opening up the laptop and checking in on what was happening that day in the life of our product. And I tend to do that by going to Campfire first before email, because that's where everything is happening right away. And what I found was that at 6:24 in the morning, a lot was happening already, and that people were up, and that there were code deploys already, and there were people already on Skype, and that wasn't a good thing. And so I kind of got a sense of what was going on. I went and looked at our internal dashboard for performance and metrics there, and I saw a chart that looked like this. Yes. This is a picture of something that was going very smoothly, going very unsmoothly now. So to understand what this is, let me just give you the tiniest little overview. So Typekit does fonts on the web, and sort of the key bit to sorting all of that out was by serving the fonts for our customers. So just in that definition, you can see there's a huge trust relationship between us and our customers, in that they have to put the style of their website in our hands, and we will serve it for them. If we don't do that, their website is broken. Significant, right? So in that trust is built with performance and reliability. The way in which our customers can use the site is by going around and finding fonts and seeing one that they want and doing a little bit of configuration, and then clicking publish, add it to their website. Once they click that publish button, this happens. We take some fonts and we process those fonts along with some JavaScript, some CSS, some configuration from the database, and we make a thing called a kit, which is kind of an abstraction of all of those things put together and then called from our customer's website. When they click that publish, not only do we put the kit together, but we put it out on our network, and we have a partner called a CDN, a content distribution network. We won't get into all the technical bits of what that means, but a CDN is essentially a network of computers all over the world where you can copy all of your static content so that it's close to the sites that want to request them. So if somebody wants to take a look at a page with, say, our fonts on it, they'll get the page from the website, but the fonts will come from very nearby them, ostensibly. That's the goal with all of this. And you do that by taking your content and putting it on a thing called an origin server, which is one machine at the network that then propagates it out to the rest of the world. So there's copies everywhere. And that's how it works. And that was one of the key parts of the architecture that helped us grow really big, was the fact that we would take the relatively brittle and hard to maintain application, which sits on top of databases and live servers and all that bit, the web application, keep it very separate from how we distributed the content on a CDN, and let basically a partner who is very, very good at that sort that out. That worked really well for us. Except in this case, because this morning, that this was happening, the thing that we saw was that in red there is the number of kits that our customers have pushed the button to publish that have not yet made it to the CDN. This is a queue of kits that are waiting to be published. Our customers are pushing the button a lot, apparently, and none of them are going anywhere. So that's what the problem was. So to sort of visualize that, the kits were being published, and this is kind of what was happening. They're getting published and published and published. Nothing is going out to the rest of the world. So not good at all. So by about 10 o'clock in the morning, the team comes together. Every morning we do a call. We actually do it at 10:05 because for some reason nobody is late for a 10:05 meeting. But if we have a 10 o'clock meeting, nobody gets there until quarter after. So I don't know why that is. But it works. You might try that. It's a little management technique. 10:05 meeting, and everybody gets together. It's kind of a stand-up in the sort of agile process. But we basically go around the table. Everybody talks about their project. If it takes more than 15 minutes, it's going too long, right? We get together. We didn't talk about any other project except the outage. What is happening, what is going on, and the engineers report that all of the kits that are in the queue have come from one partner website. That website is called About.me, and About.me is a site that lets you put up basically a splash page that says, these are all the places that I publish on the internet, and you go About.me/Jeff, and that's where your stuff is, right? And it's nice, very simple. They have this very clever UI for picking parts of the page and then clicking a Typekit font and adding that font, which is, in effect, publishing a kit for them. Well, what happened that day is that About.me has gone out of beta and sent out 400,000 emails to their customers saying, come, try the new service. Email to all of their customers except us. So I call Tony. That's Tony right there. He's the CEO. And I call Tony and I say, hey, congratulations, you guys have launched. That's awesome. He's like, yeah. Hey, we've seen a couple complaints about fonts. I'm like, yeah. No problem. We'll sort it out. Everything's fine. He's like, great, because I've got some awesome news. I'm like, what's that? He said, on Monday, this is Friday morning. He says, on Monday, we're announcing that we just sold the company to AOL. And like 3 days after you launch, he's like, yeah, complicated story, but it's awesome. And I said, congratulations, Tony, that's fantastic. He's like, so we're gonna have press in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, we're gonna be in TechCrunch again, and he's like, we'll probably get a lot more traffic. I'm like, no problem, I lied to him. And the reason I lie to him is because Silicon Valley is a very tiny little place. Because not only is Tony the CEO of About.me, he also is an investor with a fund called True Ventures, who are Typekit's primary investors. By the way, Tony is the guy who led our investment. So he is essentially my boss. So of course I lied to him and say, no problem. But in the back of my mind, of course, I'm thinking this, right? I'm like, okay. And of course, I think the only outcome that's even possible here is this, right? That's what's gonna happen. So this is December the 17th, which was a Friday, which was the Friday, the weekend before Christmas holiday. So perhaps one of the most social holidays on the calendar, right? This is when everybody's going out to do things. Our CTO was about to get on an airplane to fly to Boston to see his family and things like that. And so, you know, I kind of have to sit down with the team and say, like, a core group of us, you guys, this is what we signed up for. This is it, right? Like, you get all the flexibility, all the sort of direct connection to being able to build the thing that you've dreamed of, but at the same time comes this responsibility. And this is it. Like, we got to fix that this weekend. So everybody, our lead engineer, cancels his trip to snowboarding to Tahoe, and everybody calls their family and say, we're in this weekend to do this. And so we look at the weekend. We've got basically 3 days before this is going to happen. And what we decide was, at very least, we put a little structure around this, that we would spend the 17th identifying the problem. That was that Friday, with as much detail as we could to understand what was going and to choose an appropriate solution to it, which we would then build on the Saturday, and then integrate and launch on the Sunday, giving us, you know, early Monday morning for stress testing and things like that. So we immediately took some action, and this is based on some of the stuff that I saw back when I was at Google for a few years, and how those teams, which were doing unbelievable scale, things measuring hits to systems in the tens of thousands per second. It's just inconceivable how big the scale was. But things would go wrong from time to time. And some of the things that I learned while doing that were that the first thing you need to do is identify exactly who can solve this problem and sequester that team somewhere. Get them into an environment where they will not be distracted, bothered in any way. Very much like mission control. Obviously not the same sort of consequences if things go bad, but similar to this. Everybody in this photograph knows exactly what they are responsible for and has no distraction whatsoever in achieving that. So we did that. They got a conference room. They were in there. Nobody was coming in or out of that room except for them to come out to tell us what they needed or what they had found out. We then removed business decisions from solving tech problems in that I said to them, look, don't worry about our users, don't worry about our partners, don't worry about Tony. Don't worry about any of it. I got it. You guys just solve this technical problem as quickly as you can. And then there's just moral support, right? they gotta survive all of this, right? This is just such a Northern California refrigerator. It's just microbrew and soy milk. Like, that's all we ever had in it's classic. But that's all we could do, right? And in a position, like a leadership position, it doesn't feel like enough, right? So I remember just sitting as, like, we've been through the day, they've learned a lot, we're getting towards a solution, they're gonna go well into the night. I'm not gonna go anywhere, but there's nothing that I can do. So I'm sitting in our office and I'm sort of looking at the sun go down on the end of the first day, and I'm thinking, well, you know, I've set up the conditions for success. It's up to those guys, right? I don't know what else we can do there. We're using structure to manage all of the anxiety, right, which is great. I'll talk more about that a little later. But structure around anxiety is the only thing you can really do because else it just feeds on itself and gets out of control. So honestly, all that's left to do is waiting, right? And that's where I'm sitting there, and that's one of those moments, right? We all have those moments where you really couldn't feel more alone. You couldn't, and that's where all the fears and insecurities come back. Like, why are we doing this? This was a terrible idea in the first place. I never should have started this thing. And all of those things come back. In our more rational moments, we know none of those things are true. But in our very emotional moments, that's the only thing that's in our reality, is that kind of intense fear, really, that we must face. And the comfort comes from knowing we all do that. We all face that. Any one of us, no matter what our perceived position is, face that. And so we waited. And so, close to midnight on the Friday, they had identified the problem and they knew what the solution would be. So we sort of all kind of got together in kind of the wee hours, right? And they ran through what they had found and what they were going to do. And the reality was that we were making kits just fine. Right? You push the button, database runs, scripts go, everything's fine. Right? We're even pushing those kits across the network over to our partner just fine. There's tons of room in the pipe, so to speak. But nothing is landing. It's just bouncing off of that origin server. And it turns out we have just flooded their system with incoming requests, right? And they can't keep up. And we certainly can't switch providers right on a Friday night over the weekend. And so the guys say, well, this is where we have our one lucky break in this situation, and that their origin server is something that we have a plan and an architecture already developed to replace. We're going to make our own because there's a bunch of features and better caching, et cetera, et cetera. All these great benefits of doing it ourselves. And in fact, we've got a plan already. It's in Basecamp. And I said, great, that's awesome. They're like, yeah, it's a 6-week project. Like, oh, shit. But they're like, we think we could probably get it done tomorrow. All right. So that's what they're going to do. And so, you know, they all go home and they get to sleep in and come back early in the morning exhausted, but they start working on this. And you know, by the end of the day, we've got a lot of kits, a couple 100,000 kits in the queue now, which is more, I think, than we actually even had on the network at all before that. Just a ridiculous number of kits. And they run the thing, and it's working. And so on midnight, or God, even later than midnight on the Saturday, the 18th, they set it off to run, right? And a couple of them are going to stay up and hold its hand through the night, but off it goes. And we go get a few more hours of sleep and to wake up the next morning to see, did it work? And what we found was that it was a lot of hiccups and a lot of sort of duct tape and hand-holding, but that we had moved all the kits onto our origin server, and they were now propagating out onto the network, and oh my God, that thing worked. It was the first tiny step. I mean, we talk about minimum viable product in the startup world, right? And this is like the nano minimum viable thing that they have running. It's almost like it's a machine under Ryan's desk that's smoking, that's doing this thing. But it's going, and that works. And so then they begin the integration process, and even by midday on Sunday, we're publishing out the kits, such that when they make the announcement, the AOL thing, the traffic skyrockets once again. But the new normal was well beyond the old crisis, right? So now, we've got 20 times the capacity we need, and we can keep up with that kind of stuff, and that's awesome. Our lead engineer, Paul Hammond, published this tweet on December 19. You'll see that on Wednesday, we decided there was no possible way to get this project done before the end of January. We launched it this afternoon. There's a couple things about this tweet that I really like. One is just the inherent pride in the work. You feel it in there, right? That's awesome. But even more important, I love that the pronouns are plural. We did this. We did this together, and to me, that is a representation of the culture of a team. A culture, a set of shared values, and a set of shared accomplishments based on those values. And that's fantastic, right? I see this the sense of this all over the place. I'm a big fan of, I was a big fan of professional cycling before much of this crazy controversy. But one of the things that I always noticed, right, you see a big bike race and one guy would get across the line, victory, right? And then get in front of the press afterwards, and they say, "How did you do it? You rode as if you had a motor on your bike. How did you accomplish all that?" And they always say, "The team was very strong today." Right? It's a team brought me across the line. And for those of you that follow cycling and know something about the sport, it's all about drafting and strategy and different tactics for preserving the energy of the one person that'll get across the line, right? So the team, right? The team was very strong. And to me, one of the best ways to strengthen a team, to give them the resources that they need, is a sense of equanimity. That when shit goes wrong, they will know what to do. Even if they don't know what to do, they will know how to figure it out, and we won't freak out. And that, to me, is the environment in which we can do our best work. The best design work, the best development work, the best business decisions. When we are freed from the stress of worry, of judgment. When we're free of that, it's the only way to do our best work. Now, I know these can sound a little kind of new agey and things like that. I honestly believe these are thousands of years old, these ideas. They come from the Buddha, right? Equanimity and freedom from judgment, and the emptiness we heard about this morning, all of those things. But I'm not suggesting we all, to be good designers, shave our heads and make our offices look like this. Although that's pretty cool. I believe these are techniques. These are part of the design process. These are the way to achieve good products on the internet today, no matter what you do. So let me just show you a few of these techniques that I found have been valuable in building this sense of equanimity. Because equanimity is made up of security. This is almost like that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? The sense of security. I am safe here. I have food, I have water, I have shelter. I'm safe, right? So what is that sense of security in a little more existential sense of working and collaborating in teams? How do we build that sense of trust between one another? To know that I can do my best work here because everybody around me is also doing their best work. We expect it of one another, and we forgive one another when it doesn't happen. And then finally, purpose. All of this, none of this matters without, in Maslow's world, self-actualization. But in a team, having a shared sense of purpose so that everything sort of is aimed towards the final goal. This is hard on today's web, whether you're working in mobile apps or more traditional websites or anything. It's very difficult because we no longer have control. We never really did. But even more so, we don't have control over our entire environment, right? We use the cloud, use systems like Amazon, right? And various other Rackspace and Heroku and all of these places where we have bits and pieces of our infrastructure out there managed by somebody else on machines we've never seen. And we're trying to create a user experience that feels seamless, has very low latency, has incredibly high responsiveness and reliability. Those are the qualities of good design now, right? Not just good engineering, but good design requires those things in environments that exist in the real world somewhere, such that the natural events that happen cause very significant consequences to the quality of our service. So we see things like this. Every service on the web has a page like this that tells what parts of the system are falling apart right now and which ones are solid, right? And that's the only way that the web will continue, is to build systems and design systems and create a user experience that accounts for this kind of stuff so that you can be as responsive as possible. So here's a technique or two, right? We have developed at Typekit an emergency response protocol. In fact, it was developed by Mandy, who gave the talk earlier. So you know it's good, right? So this is like everybody in San Francisco is supposed to have one of these because our city falls down once every 100 years, and it's been 106 years since it happened last. So we all kind of have one of those. But what this is a sense of not just something to have in a case of an emergency, but a sense of security when there is no emergency, knowing that we have that. And that's what we sort of built here, right? By following some very simple things. Clear and immediate roles for everybody on the team. Everybody knows what they need to do, right? That we have a repair team. These are the people that just go fix the problem. That's all they're supposed to do. They're sequestered. They have their beer and soy milk. They don't need anything else. Just go do the work. But then one person on that team is essentially the scribe, right? That brings the work, the findings that they have out to report to the rest of the team. So the rest of the team isn't bothering the repair people all the time. And then a communication manager, which is somebody that takes the data coming out of the team and crafts it into messages that can go out to the world, to partners, investors, the rest of the team, and most importantly, the customers, right? So it may not always be the same people every time. And in fact, an emergency might happen at 2 o'clock in the morning and there's only 2 people there to solve the problem. One of the people might have many of these roles, all 3 of the roles. So therefore, we have this sort of cascade of things that can happen and responses that we should take, even down to the words that you should paste into the box to push the button to go to Twitter. Like, that's all you have to do. Like, we're aware of the situation, we'll have more, whatever, the words are, push the button, and it goes, right? Internal systems. This is one from 37 Signals that rolls up all the time. When something bad happens, they can see it in a place like this, in a place like this. But I actually believe that practicing our craft should apply to our own internal tools. So internal dashboards, this is one that we use for Typekit. It shows us the health of the system. This is the health of the usage of the system. And then we make those present, put them in the place where the people are. So they don't have to remember to go see it. They can literally just look up, right? This is Panic Software, showed us a picture of what they do. Also make this visible in a transparent way to our customers, right? This information has to come out. It's the only way you'll build trust is through the honesty and transparency of what's actually happening. And then if things really do go wrong and things are really bad, you need to be as transparent as you can about sharing what you've learned publicly, which can be very difficult, right? The people in charge should write this, not people who do marketing or legal, right? In fact, you probably shouldn't even show these things to them. You should just write what happened and let your customers know that we will do whatever we can to make sure it doesn't happen again, right? So that's sort of building the security, both with us and with our customers. Also really important is building trust within the team. I'm talking to John Alspaugh about some of his experiences as the CTO of Etsy. And one of the things he told me I found fascinating was he had this realization that nobody thinks they're doing the wrong thing when they push the button that takes the web app offline. Right? Nobody thinks they're doing the wrong thing. They think they're doing exactly the right thing, and then suddenly everything breaks. And what the hell just happened? What we need to do is to assure everybody on the team that we will put every measure in place to ensure that that doesn't happen. But if it does, we'll do everything we can to figure out why without placing blame, right? We need to unpack these very emotional and subjective situations with very objective techniques. This comes from manufacturing, right? Like there's loads of examples of this in the real world of manufacturing where, for example, Sakichi Toyoda, who was sort of the father of the rebuilding of Japan, right, back after the World War II, responsible for a lot of the sort of mechanization and their dominance in the auto industry, as well as electronics, by identifying quality as the most important thing that they could focus on. And he did so with a very, very simple, again, almost Zen-like technique of simply asking why. Why are these things not working? And then asking that question up to 5 times until they got to the root cause of the answer, the 5 whys. This is something that I think every team, whether they're an engineering team or not, can take into account. This is sort of apocryphal story, I think, of Jeff Bezos going to an Amazon warehouse and the distribution center is shut down, and he says, what's happening? And they say, well, an employee has injured his thumb. And so he gets a whiteboard, and he writes on the top why. And why did why did that happen? Well, it got caught in the conveyor belt. And then he writes why again. And says, well, he was, chasing his bag. Why was he chasing his bag? Well, he put it on the conveyor, and it started unexpectedly. Well, why did he put it on the conveyor belt? Well, he's using it as a table. Why? Because the employees have no place to put their personal belongings. Aha, that's a thing we can solve. That's not going to solve the problem in every instance, but they identified why this happened in this case so that it won't happen in the future. And if I think about the story that I told you, right, we were having, up to 60 minutes to publish a kit. Well, why is that? And we found out, well, the reason why is because the queue is growing, right? That was that chart. Well, why is the queue growing? And that's because the kits are not being delivered. And why is that happening? Well, the origin server is not accepting our kits. Why is the origin server not accepting the kits? Well, why number 4 was that the origin server was designed for high output, but never designed for the kind of input rates that we were throwing at it. Why did that happen? Well, our current input rate was never considered as part of the requirements when we evaluated CDNs. A decision that happened months ago, right? So now we know we have a very high input rate, and we can adapt and solve that problem. This takes away the blame, right? This takes away the well, Paul screwed up when he picked the CDN, right? Which is such a natural instinct to do. Who's at fault here? Who's in trouble? Which causes, again, which enables more trust. So another thing around trust is something I like to think about as ambient accountability, because I hate the HR process of the annual review cycle and people writing about their peers and all that nonsense. What I prefer is to build trust every day by showing people's performance every day as a natural part of their work, right? One of the ways we do that is with group chat, right? There's so many techniques for doing that, but the communication inside your team is really the point here. But by using group chat, we get to things, a couple of interesting effects, right? Everybody lives in the chat room all the time, even when we're all in the same room, because the information they need is in there, and their peers are in there, and it's the shortest way to get what you need to do your work. And it leads to communication compression. So I have a question. How many of you, if you got a big paragraph email from your boss, could answer your boss's question with this? Just write that in the email. No, send it back. Anybody? A couple people, great. If you are looking for work, I'd like to talk to you. No, I think you're right. This is, because email, the medium, is the message, right? You're like, well, thank you for your note. And you write back a letter to say, I've considered what you've said. I don't think at this time it's feasible, right? But if you're in group chat, it's chat, right? And so we would have conversations like this all the time, where we would be working on stuff. Yeah, okay, done, right? We're done. That's it. That's all we have to talk about this. It's not a meeting. It's not a meeting about the meeting we're going to have to talk about our communicate. Done. Compress the communications. Things work a lot faster. It's flat. It's wonderful. Now, I said people would go to the chat room to get the information they needed, and that's because we built robots, right? Our chat system, we use Campfire, has APIs. You can talk to other systems. So the information that people need to get their job done only shows up in the chat room. So that means they go there to get it. That means a sense of community builds up inside there. And so we wrote all kinds of things, code deploys and pull requests out of GitHub and support tickets that were being closed and revenue events, whenever somebody would sign up or cancel or things like that. Very important because you see the activity around you and you tend to trust the people because like, wow, that guy is on fire with the support tickets today, or how many pull requests has she done? It's unbelievable, right? That kind of stuff. And perhaps the most important part of all culture in any team, right, in a group chat situation is the latest animated GIFs. You can never forget about that. So just, again, another technique that represents the communication. The other thing is something Mandy referred to, the sense of design critique, right? This, by the way, is the conference room where Frank Lloyd Wright would bring his students in to show their work, and they would have a critique of that work and things like that. Now, why you would put a tree in the middle of the table, I'm not quite sure that's conducive, but he's the designer, right? So that's where he would do that kind of stuff. I've been in a lot of design review. I mentioned earlier I was in Google for a number of years, and they had design review all the time. Maybe you've heard of some of those design reviews. To me, this is what design review was like at Google. This is where a designer would come with their precious idea and like show everybody and just take shots at it. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice a little bit. Anyway, that is not building trust, right? That is the last thing that we want to foster. What we want to foster is much more sense of problem solving together. And that's what I've always thought about. And to me, it's much more than just design review. I want anybody in the company to come, right? Anybody. And so we didn't even call it design review in our company. We called it product review. So engineers would come and show a URL structure or a database schema, and everybody would contribute into feedback to that. Attendance was open to anybody in the company, optionally, right? Nobody had to be there, but optionally, anybody in the company. Our office manager would come and offer feedback. But participation was mandatory, right? You had to be there. Laptops closed, we're working. It's work, it's not a meeting, it's work. We would make it really clear it's not a place where you express your opinions. Everybody has opinions certainly about design, right? Just like they do about music. Very few people can actually practice it, though. So, for example, a bad piece of feedback is, I don't like that blue. A better piece of feedback is, why is that blue? Now you're asking about the process. Show me the thinking that went into this. The great piece of feedback is color really important here? Tell me about your decision. Why did you choose that? Why are we doing it this way? And then finally, we would, at the very beginning of each one of them, make it really clear whether it was a convergent or a divergent session that we're going to have. Let me explain what that means. If you think about the space of ideas, right? When you're starting a new project, you want divergence. You want to think about as many problems as you can. So we're going to add a new feature to the website, to the web app. What could it be? It could be anything, right? So we're brainstorming with limitless possibility. It's like improv, right? One of the key aspects of improv is to say yes and. If somebody offers you a line, you say yes. If you say no, you're done. There's nowhere to go anymore, right? So everything here is like, that's great, how about this? And we just build and build and build. Now that's very different from, we've been doing a ton of work and iterating, and now we need to converge all of these ideas down to one solution, and I need your help with that. So I need a convergent product review now, in which we take all of the stuff that we've done so far and evaluate the feasibility technically and from a user perspective and all of those things. We acknowledge the constraints that are there. We drive towards consensus. If you do one without, when it should be the other one, it's a disaster. If you're trying to solve a problem, but one person on the team is brainstorming blue sky, like, well, what if we did it with streaming video? And you're like, God, we're almost done. Like, I don't want to do that, that kind of stuff. It requires a sense of trust on the team. And all of those techniques help build that, right? And that trust, I think, also helps when everybody on the team, you believe, and they believe it of you, has good taste. That you all share a sense of taste, common goals, right? That nobody's going to have ideas that are going to distract and things like that. And I think the best way to build taste in any kind of product development work is by spending time with your users. However you do it. I don't care about all the research techniques that are out there. I don't care which ones you like. Spend time with the people who use it because it makes you more like them, and then you can design for yourself. If you're more like your users, you will have instincts and you will have better taste, and you will be able to have decisions that move you closer to what your users really want from your product. Now, all of these things that I've just pointed out are examples of storytelling, really. They're examples of how we talk to each other in a team, right, to communicate, to say, this is what I've learned, this is what I think, this is what I believe, and tell each other those things, whether it's in group chat, whether it's a process of like having a post-mortem on a terrible outage, whether it's in a design review or product review, any one of those things. It's literally about storytelling. And the story that we tell as we move through product development, through iteration after iteration, is critical to our success. So that everybody feels like they are in the loop, on the same page, or whatever metaphor you want to use for the communication process. One way to think about that is to think about how the daily tasks that we do represents the values and purpose that we have, or vice versa, how the ultimate goal trickles down into every decision and every task we do. So I like to think about it as a little bit of a hierarchy, that we measure our momentum in days, day by day. We say, this is a good week, right? Lots of progress, good looking numbers, nice job, everybody. We did a good solid chunk of week. Go have a weekend, let's come back, let's do another good week when you get back. That's great. We would do a weekly sort of review on a Friday afternoon. Everybody crack open a beer and sit down and look at our numbers and talk about the successive launches, the things that went wrong, and kind of talk it out for an hour every Friday afternoon. Wonderful way to say, good week, lots of momentum. What's next? And we measure progress, projects themselves, like for example, a new origin server, in weeks. Right? We say, great, the next milestone will get us to a minimum viable feature that we can ship before South by Southwest. A chunk of weeks that we measure in measuring our momentum add up to a project that we can ship. Again, chunk of work, everybody knows what it is, we're all on the same page. We can then measure, beyond that, priorities. Measure those priorities kind of in months, right? And we'll say, for example, we're going to focus on performance and distribution in Q2, or whatever, so that all the projects that we're working on have a theme that go together and sort of add up to an overall, sort of chapters in the book. They're all about something, right? So that's good. We measure our vision for what we're working on in years, because we're going to keep working on this. We have a trust relationship with the people who are using our products. Those people expect us to be around. We expect that the work that we have to do to achieve our vision is going to take years of time. And this, organize the world's information, make it universally accessible. That's Google's mission statement, or whatever we call those things, right? That's audacious, that's huge. It's a tremendous amount of work. It's not something that one company can do, even though I think they can. But it's unbelievable to think like the world's information available to everybody, right? That's a vision that they want to achieve that will take them years. I think we should all have that. But ultimately, right, we get to purpose, and the purpose is timeless. Like, why? Why make the world's information universally accessible? Why put web fonts on every page on the internet? Like, why do that? And that, to me, is one of the most important things that a team can share. The reason for being. In fact, so important to me, it's one of the questions that I would sort of get at in job interviews. I would ask people, what problem are you passionate about solving? Like passionate, what are you trying to solve? And then, right, why is this the place to do it? Because we're flexible with our careers, with the scope of our work. We go from place to place, ultimately trying to solve the same problem and finding different venues for that. So purpose is the last thing I'd like to take a couple minutes to talk about. When I think about purpose, I tend to zoom way out. It's probably because I studied history in school, but to zoom way out and to say, like, why are we doing any of this stuff at all? And if you zoom out way out, like to the level of human civilization, and you look back into history, one of the defining things that has perpetuated civilizations, one of the things that has kept civilization's going is this: literacy. We talked about literacy this morning as well and held it up against oral tradition and things like that. But the bigger picture around literacy, right, is this idea that I will learn something and I will record it and you will be able to see it and learn it too without me being there. We can perpetuate our ideas. We can build up a corpus of human knowledge, right, so we don't have to relearn everything from scratch over and over and over again. And learn that fire is a way to cook food, and then I don't need to go find so many calories anymore, and my life is better and fewer of us die. So then I, write that down so that the next person knows, like, oh, okay, I will use fire to do that. And they learn more because they'd had more time because they had more calories. Like, it goes on and on like that. Trust me, I'm ridiculously simplifying this, but you get the idea, right? What I am interested in is the technology we use to perpetuate that knowledge. Because the technology that we have developed over the millennium has made that easier and easier for people to access knowledge of the people who came before them. And how powerful is that? When we can take the means of distribution and production of knowledge and give it to everybody. And that's what we've been doing. We've been getting better and better and better at that, so much so that it's overwhelmed us, and now we have robots that do it for us, right? That sort the information and make it accessible to all of us. And that's what the web is. That is the culmination of human knowledge connected to, right, and shared. The connections between each other, between our ideas, is the reason I believe we're putting the web together. And it's a reason, actually, that I think web standards are important. Because it is the most, I believe, it is the way in which to give ideas the most longevity. To put them in their simplest form, their most universal form, and to tie it all together. If you think about that, well, that opens up something like, why would you do web fonts? That's why we did web fonts. Because it makes the knowledge more accessible. Because it's not trapped in images or Flash or anything like that. It makes it more accessible. It can be translated, right? It's open to people who can't see the screen. It's reusable in countless different ways, and on and on and on. So a tiny sliver of the big picture is what we were working on. Now, what's more important, I think, today is what you're working on. And what your vision might be, and what your purpose is, and where you're doing it. And to think about that purpose. And use that as a motivating factor to get through the difficulty of the work that we do and being in teams and things like that. It's not easy, and you will find yourself in the water. You'll tip out of your canoe and you'll feel alone. You'll be choking on the water and you'll feel afraid and you'll feel angry sometimes. But remember that one thing I said in the beginning. That's a very human way to feel. We all feel that way. No matter where we are in an organization or what our accomplishments have been or haven't yet been, we all feel that way. You will feel that way, but it's okay. So it's a lot of work to do. It's a lot bigger than just taking a job, but I think we're all up for it. And I wish you the best. So thank you very much.